The relationship between China and the United States remains one of the most consequential in the world. On issues of trade, technology, and geopolitical influence, what's the potential for cooperation and growth? From San Francisco, I'm Mike Walter. Let's take it full frame.
A long-standing and complex economic relationship.
So I think we're going to have, one way or the other, a long-term relationship when it comes to supply chains, supplier networks, and just how the China fits into our global patterns here.
I do think that they have some ways to get to the consumption or demand side. I would think that take 5 to 10 years, and that would be healthy. Beijing knows that formula.
Promoting leaders to take action.
There's a lot of misperceptions about China's drive. Is it, ideology? So I think most people would come to say, of course not, right? China is very, very pragmatic, and it's driven by economic incentives. It's driven by, very, very practical objectives.
Cooperation kind of depends upon two countries being interdependent and having something to offer each other. At the current moment, part of the problem is that I don't really see where the U.S. has a lot of things to offer China or much leverage over China.
Cultural diplomacy gives rise to deeper understanding.
The beautiful thing, and what we've experienced on this trip, is that whenever we make music or make art together or for each other, it immediately breaks down the walls.
Technology could be a path forward for future partnerships.
I think in terms of the China-U.S. tech competition, there are only 2 possible outcomes: win-win, lose-lose, and there isn't going to be a third possibility, which is one country win, another country lose.
Rethinking China-U.S. relations. Next.
The U.S. and China are home to the world's 2 largest economies, and their economic ties reach far beyond their borders. As global conditions shift, what might help guide this relationship toward greater stability and shared benefit?
Daniel Garst is a lecturer at California State University, Fresno. He spent over a decade living and working in China and has published news and scholarly articles on China's economy.
As you look at the state of affairs right now between the U.S. and China, where do you see opportunities for cooperation despite all the friction?
That's hard to say. The problem with seeing opportunities for cooperation kind of depends upon two countries being interdependent and having something to offer each other, and also being able to exert leverage over each other to kind of compromise and get to that situation. At the current moment, part of the problem is that I don't really see where the U.S. has a lot of things to offer China or much leverage over China. The main form of leverage would have been China's export trade and what they've been able to do, at least for now. Whether that can be continued in the future, they were able to divert a lot of the trade they sent to America to other countries. Volume of exports to Europe has gone up. They're also doing transshipments from Vietnam, and Chinese companies are also doing FDI in Southeast Asia. And then there's stuff probably coming in from Mexico. So that source of leverage doesn't really exist anymore. I suppose one thing that China could definitely offer the U.S. and where there might be room for cooperation would be forms of foreign direct investment. And that could include areas like electric vehicles, green energy technology. The trouble, of course, is we have an administration that's not terribly interested in that type of stuff at the moment, but down the future, 3 years down the road, that could be a possibility.
You get the sense from the Trump administration that they've got all the cards in their hand in kind of how they handle all their relationships with different countries. But you don't see that with China.
No, not at all in the case of China. and what's overlooked here in the discussion, yes, China was relying on the U.S. market, or we should use that in the past tense. But the U.S. also is very dependent on Chinese imports rather, imported goods from China. Not just kind of the stereotypic stuff like board games, dolls, all that sort of thing. But one thing that hasn't received a lot of attention in the press are transformers. We import a lot of transformers, or we did. I haven't looked at the data lately, but China was a big source of transformers, and of course those are going to be critical for redoing our grid. Grid in America is aging. It needs a lot of new gear and equipment, and we don't produce those things right now. It will take years to get that manufacturing up to steam. So that's a big card that China holds in their hand. And of course, another card they had was the farm imports card. And they found, of course, other sources for soybeans, including ones which are less expensive than American crops in Brazil and Argentina. So.
One other area where I see is the Paris Climate Accords. You saw China and the U.S. kind of coming together and leading the rest of the world. Do you see, and I know in this climate right now, maybe not climate change, but see an avenue where the two countries can work together, where we saw it in that example?
Well, it's hard right now. I would think again in the future that we could work together to tackle climate change. That would be one area of cooperation.
But what does that do to somebody like you who spent time there in China and recognizes that once you get past government, it's actually people and
it makes me very sad. Yeah, it makes me very sad. I mean, I think that's what's going to happen is we're going to have more interaction between different business firms and private actors, and that would also include like foundations in America. And that sort of exchange could be very, very useful.
What would you like to see in terms of U.S.-China relations, maybe 5 years out, 10 years out? What would make you smile?
For us to get back to a more cooperative relationship. And I think there's a possibility for that. I mean, in 5 or 10 years, things could change dramatically, both in Beijing and the U.S. We should welcome Chinese firms to come into America and, build car factories. I mean, BYD, and there have been some Chinese companies who have done the FDI thing, foreign direct investment. One is Fuyao Glass. That company is, they bought up abandoned factories in Ohio, and, they're producing high quality automobile glass, and they're doing quite well. So
the U.S. needs to put up the open for business sign, basically.
Well, I think if we want to compete with China, we should invest less in tariffs and more in like industrial subsidies and support. I mean, two can play that game, and that's why I'm rather disappointed with the current policies we have. But, again, down the road, things can change.
Yeah. Daniel, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Jiguo He is a professor of finance at the Graduate School of Business at Stanford University. He is a financial economist whose expertise covers financial markets, financial institutions, and macroeconomics. He received his bachelor's and master's degree from Tsinghua University before receiving his PhD from the Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern University.
Well, we're going to talk about the two largest economies. Obviously, that relationship key. So where is the relationship now, would you say? And what is the impact on the globe, you think?
Right now, they are deeply intertwined still. But you see that yesterday, I'm teaching a China class at the Stanford GSB MBA students. I asked one of my long-term friend who was the government official, actually. Was like a PBOC, like a People's Bank of China, People's Bank of China. That's a central bank. So he's working on, these kind of very, very interesting issues that our students like. But what he was saying that, most of the time that, yes, you break the tie, but through the third country that China, export there, and then that third country buy back almost the same product. So in that way that, it's still well connected. That's one thing. Let alone many of the direct trade that was still happening.
One of the things I think about is I've interviewed a lot of soybean farmers in Iowa over the years. And obviously, as you know, business, it's relationships. It's not just trade, and it happens over time. And when you look at the soybean trade, Iowa and China, it took years to build that up. And yet it's almost severed instantly with the tariffs. That can't survive over time, can it? I mean, talk to me about the relationship aspect of all of this.
Yeah, that's a super important dimension that you mentioned, and I'm glad that you use this soybean part. All these are kind of soft connections were lost nowadays, and both sides at this point, I do not feel like they're actively try to build it up. There are many people worried about it. It's like, both insiders feel like, okay, this is the other side's fault, while the people who were through this feel like, guys, you can't do that.
Is there an off-ramp where suddenly you can see things moving in another direction? What do you see as a scenario there where perhaps...
Actually, I do see. So this is something that the difference between the U.S. and the China. I have these stories, but I couldn't have a very clear solutions. I think that I would have said, like, in China seems to be, there's a lot of people can do that.
What does the state visit signify when Trump goes to China? Does that help to ease things?
Next time?
Yeah.
I hope so. I really, really hope so. But I do know that in Beijing, some people will feel like is this something, what can they achieve?
Can you talk about the economy in China and the things that catch your eye?
If you go back to China and in a way that usually you land at one of two cities, Shanghai or Beijing, sometimes Hong Kong, there, Shenzhen, these are normal names. And then you see all these big changes. What's really caught my eye actually was that when I was in Beijing 2 years ago, I hop on a taxi, and now most of the Didi is like over here, taxi cars are actually electronic for obvious reasons, because in some sense that they will be running very efficiently for shorter time, right? EV, because electricity, the battery. Okay, that's fine. Then I realized that I didn't know this brand. Because I thought I knew like BYD, usual names, and Xiaomi or whatever. Then I didn't know this brand. I was asking the driver, I said, what is this? Like, this look cool, because it looked like a BYD. How do I not know? And he said, I'm telling you, this is the so-called Hawk Fox. Whoa, Hawk Fox, what is this? And he was telling me this is basically produced by a state-owned company, Beijing Automobile. Once this technology become, everybody can do it. I guess the booster from these like cheaper financing and all these things, and they will also try to do it. So those are the things that I wanted to say, that not only the energetic competition, super competition, you might have heard about these words. It's not only under the private sector, but also this like local SOE sector.
So what about the transformation and of course the domestic marketplace? That's been an area trying to gin up the domestic market. What are you seeing there in terms of getting more?
You could say consumption-driven economy, right? I think Beijing knows it. So in terms of the consumption part, it's very important to recognize that China's transform from a real estate-driven economy, where it's pretty simple to do, that there are products to be made, and it's all already accumulation over 10 years over the supply chain. Basically, you need to break it up and find somewhere for these producers or suppliers to go. That's a very, very tough job, and Beijing is realizing that they have to do this surgery. Investment is a very easy things to implement, because you can talk to the local government saying, no, these are the things that I will look at you. And then the investment measure is actually reported by statistics department, and then they can use it to promote. I think in the past 2 years, Beijing knows this problem, and therefore that the consumption side is pushing a lot, and these new production and all these things, hopefully, and I do think that they have some ways to get to the consumption or demand side, and if that's I would think that take 5 to 10 years, and that would be healthy.
Professor, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Coming up,
collaboration is just more fun than competitiveness.
I mean, it is kind of like America and China, like when they're against each other, it doesn't help anyone.
Cultural exchange has the potential to foster greater understanding between people. We follow youth marching bands in China and the U.S. who are showing the power of music diplomacy.
These American students are all devoted to the marching arts, a form that blends music, drills, and spectacle.
So glad to be here. He may not remember me, but I remember him.
He remember you too.
Okay.
This is Jeff Wilson, a director who has a long history of bringing groups to take part in exchanges with Chinese marching bands.
We're friends, yes. So our school, and yeah. Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
But Jeff's connection to China runs even deeper, tracing back nearly 4 decades.
It changed my life when I came here in 1987.
Now they want to take a giant step forward. So their goal is to do some marching on the other side of the world.
My first time when I was 17 years old in 1987, I was a student performing in the band.
Now they're working for a 4-city tour of China this June.
We were coming at that time because China was just opening up to the West. And they were inviting arts groups and youth groups to share and exchange to build bridges together.
But there's a place that holds a special memory for Jeff.
One of the wonders of the world. We came onto the Great Wall in formation, performed a concert for all the guests who were there. A lot of the times when the Chinese tourists at that time saw us, and they saw me back when I had blonde hair, they would stop and stare because they haven't seen so many Westerners.
Since then, Jeff has returned to China almost every decade.
Well, the beautiful thing, and what we've experienced on this trip, is that whenever we make music or make art together or for each other, it immediately breaks down the walls. Even if we don't have perfect English or Chinese. we still understand. It really changed my perspective of the world and how America and China were all the same.
That young player from the trip has now become the director. Almost 40 years later, the same melody passed on to a younger generation. Staged in the same iconic setting, their performance is just as captivating as it was back then. And this particular trip carries an even greater meaning for Jeff. He saw someone truly special stepping into the legacy.
I want this for all of my students, and I'm lucky to have my daughter there too.
My name is Riley Wilson. It's like I'm following in my dad's footsteps. He was here when he was my age for his first time. It means a lot to me.
My name is Dana. Yeah, it's been incredible having this opportunity. Actually, my grandparents are in the crowd. So, yeah, Nai, if you see this, hi.
My name is Samantha Martinez. It is such a huge honor to be here, being able to show people my passion, also celebrating new friendships.
I'm Daniel.
My name's Thomas. This is my first time to China.
This is my first time to China. I think this is really cool because I get to speak with a lot of musicians, and especially playing with the other Chinese students on drums.
These students would join 2 other American high schools for a special performance, one that would bring them together with their Chinese counterparts.
Did you watch the Peking opera last night? Were you awake for that? Yeah. So you want to reach for the love. And I'm happy for them to see the bands from China. The school from Beijing that went to the United States in Indiana, we've only seen them on YouTube. Really excited to see them live.
On the other side, these Chinese students are ready to welcome their friends from across the ocean. In 2025, these students made history, taking China's marching arts to the world stage for the very first time. The Drum Corps International Competition, often called the World Cup of Marching Arts.
I saw them at DCI finals. It just like, boom, it hit me. And I was like, wow, I'll remember that.
You know, DCI is the best groups in the world. So when we were in Indiana, I saw Beijing 57. I watched them and I was thinking about, wow, their group is almost like as good as our group.
Hello， 大家好，我叫杨冠道，今年高1了，担任的声部是小鼓。收获友谊，在美国 DCI 站起来鼓掌是对这个乐手最大的尊重。跟他们我学到了激情的一些鼓掌，互相尊重。
我叫刘子瑜。是57中学镲队队长，有一段的打击乐 solo， 镲是站在整个队伍的最前方的。其实我是很想让外国友人们看到中国的行进艺术的这样一个力量。
我是来自管乐团的杨学思，是前排声部的一员，敲过满林巴、弹音琴，还敲过木琴。
就是我们应该是全中国也是第一支去到美国参加这个比赛的队。
我叫谢浩廷，担任萨克斯风演奏员。
这个是友谊祭酒天长，用这首曲子迎接他们的到来。我们在美国的时候感受到了美国学生的热情，也希望在这次在迎接他们的时候，大家一起感受行李管乐的美好。
These 2 bands met before, over a decade ago.
We really wanted to show the world, yes, we could do this together.
Our next band is the East-West Fusion All-Star.
How are we going to mix the 2 uniforms together? So we came up with an idea that we would design the exact same uniform, the same cut, the same stripes, but one was blue and one was red.
他们是美国蓝，我们是中国红，所以就有了我们现在的演出服。
But the really fun part was we intermixed them, so it was red, blue, red, blue, red, blue as we marched down the parade.
And for the first time, they performed a fusion song.
And we called it Shenandoah Jasmine Flower. It was a traditional Chinese piece with a traditional American piece to make one unity song.
美国孩子的眼神都放光，他们哦，原来中国人吹茉莉花的感觉是这样的，真的感觉到文化在互相的交融在一起。
The legacy of East-West Fusion Band still carries forward. This depth of fusion, however, leads to something even greater.
Each band had not that large, but when you combined, the musicians just were joyful to hear so much more volume because of the extra bodies. And when you join together, it makes a powerful statement.
In Beijing, the magic of music is already at work among the young musicians who are finally meeting in person.
我们大家都知道这是什么节奏，就自来熟，我们能玩到一块儿去演。
We didn't talk about it before. We just got together and say, hey, let's play some drums. Even if you don't speak the same language, you're definitely playing the same language. And you trust each other to follow that instruction and create something really cool.
These young people are naturally doing what their predecessors did 12 years ago, bringing fusion to life once again. The day they've all been waiting for has finally arrived. Even before the performance began, the students were already buzzing with excitement.
Really excited for the chance to perform out here.
Shaking, I'm so excited. And I just hope that everyone who's going to go on today has the best time. Yeah!
Yeah!
Super excited, and I can't wait to express who I am and what we do here in Pi.
激动吗？激动，交流起来，然后尽量让下次咱们再见面的时候，记得大家都面熟。
Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoy the show. The show must always go on. We have a full house, and let's have a great time.
The giant group drum line that wasn't even organized. That would stick with me because of just powerful. In the drum battle, like you could show off what you do, but as a full group, you can achieve such a better sound.
Collaboration is just more fun than competitiveness.
I mean, it is kind of like America and China, like when they're against each other, it doesn't help anyone.
因为行进本来就是一个向前走。 所以咱们乐团联合在一起向前走，觉得对中国和美国的中国也会更加进步吧。
我们敲一下门，他们总会在里面会对我们做出回应，然后甚至开门，然后迎接我们，然后走到我们身边来。就是付出不是一方的，总会得到回报。
Coming up.
There are a lot of still, American companies operating in China and Chinese companies doing great business in the U.S. And so there are cautious optimism that we can manage and navigate this very delicate relationship forward.
Artificial intelligence is reshaping industries on both sides of the Pacific. How are China and the United States fostering innovation, and what might the next phase of competition and cooperation look like?
Nina Shang is the founder of China Money Network, a news and data platform tracking China's smart investments and technology innovation. She's the author of several books, including Red AI, Victories and Warnings from China's Rise in Artificial Intelligence, and U.S.-China Tech War, What Chinese Tech History Reveals About Future Tech Rivalry. We met in San Francisco, where Xiang spoke at the Asia Society's conference on the future of China-U.S. relations.
Nina, thank you so much for talking to us. I mean, just moments ago, you're moderating a panel with two authors who, like you, have a lot of experience covering the tech industry and China. Any takeaways from your conversation?
Yeah, so I think there is a lot of pessimism, unfortunately, but also cautious optimism. So, there is this sense of a lot of unpredictable factors, impacting U.S.-China dynamic. A lot of the policies from the Trump administration and how it's doing to the investment community, to the business community. And also, I guess on the U.S. side, there is this sense of lack of self-confidence. So there's growing anxiety on the part of the U.S. audience, feeling like China is winning and winning more and more on many more different fronts. So, we have seen the dismantling of a lot of U.S.-China collaboration in technology, in business and investments. So, we've seen a lot of, research labs closed. We've seen a lot of Chinese researchers in the U.S. returning back to China. We've seen, investments dropping significantly cross-border, especially technology investment. But still, there are, we have to put things back in perspective. If you look at, the level and the depths of collaboration that still exist, Walmart is still doing good business in China, despite a lot of American companies already exiting China. There are a lot of still, American companies operating in China and Chinese companies doing great business in the U.S. And so there are cautious optimism that we can manage and navigate this very delicate relationship forward.
So it's interesting. One of the things you said was this feeling that China is winning, which gets to the whole kind of, is it cooperation? Is it competition? And the other thing that I think about when you say that is China, the perception that China is winning because China is focused, laser focused on the future, and the F word for the United States is fragmented? That seems to be like all over the place. One day it's this, the next day it's that. Do you think that's part of it?
Exactly that. I think that's definitely a major driver. Look at U.S. policy, right? Look at the back and forth. Look at the legislative front. When you have new administrations coming, you could dismantle the law that the previous administration put in. But there is also, a fundamental fact-based perception on people, in the business, in AI sector, in technology, that China is really advancing at a pace, I guess, beyond many people's expectations, especially with what happened, in AI, like, DeepSeek and also Manus AI. Those sort of caught everybody a little bit, off guard. Like people didn't expect China could have this rabbit in their head. So I think that really changed people's perception of how this dynamic is playing out. From my own perspective, because I wrote the book on China's AI sector back in 2019, I was a little pessimistic, and I think what happened with during the past year with China's AI space made me rethink what did I do wrong in terms of my assumptions. So I think back in 2019, I thought, China's innovation ecosystem as a whole, I see some really structural constraints. And I think those might hinder China's technological innovation. But it turns out, the whole system in its entirety doesn't have to work as a whole. But instead, as long as you have pockets of innovation hubs or places where there's relative, tolerance and openness for greatly talented young people to get together with a very, single-handed, objective to advance on AI, then they can do wonderful things. They can do miracles.
You do this introspection. Where did I get things wrong? But here in the U.S., people get things wrong about China quite a bit when it comes to innovation. What do you think the common misconceptions are here in the U.S.?
Yeah, so today, interestingly, like there was a talk by a researcher exactly on that topic. He mentioned like there's a lot of like misperceptions about China's drive. So the question is like you ask China, you should ask like U.S. investors or U.S. politicians or policymakers like what is driving China? Is it ideology? Is it communism that's driving China? So I think most people would come to say, of course not, right? China is very, very pragmatic, and it's driven by economic incentives. It's driven by, very, very practical objectives. That's a big one for sure. Other mistakes or wrong perceptions. I mentioned a little bit about how like American politicians might want to exaggerate China's technology capabilities. I think there is still such a tendency. China, similarly, China's tech space or innovation space is a little bit like the perhaps the current administration. It's very unpredictable, right? So it's very hard to say right now after what happened with DeepSeek and Menace AI, scoring big on the AI race agenda, that that's going to happen again. So I think there is that unpredictability that we have to be cautious to think, okay, China is winning and they're going to continue to win going forward. So maybe a little bit of that kind of misperception as well.
Let's talk about AI, because you've watched it quite a bit and you've written about it. What's the next chapter look like in AI development in China, do you think?
It's very hard for me to make any predictions. I think we'll see the same pattern persist among U.S. and China. So China will still have this very practical approach to it. They're going to be focused on AI's application, right? So how do you use AI, as a tool to improve productivity, as a tool to discover new drugs, as a tool to help with education. But the U.S. will be more focused on fundamental research. They probably will produce the next technological breakthrough in terms of new AI large new model frameworks or new approach to advancing AI. So we're going to see that dynamic persist, I suspect. And in terms of AI technology as a whole, I think it's clear that it's going to disrupt how everything is done.
Let me finish with one final question. We hear this expression a lot from China: win-win cooperation, and certainly we've seen where the two sides cooperate and it benefits both countries. Now there's all this friction, but do you see areas where you can see collaboration moving forward? Where are the kind of sectors or areas where you think there's a possibility where some of the friction will go away?
I think in terms of the China-U.S. tech competition, there are only two possible outcomes: win-win, lose-lose, and there isn't going to be a third possibility, which is one country win, another country lose. Doesn't matter, whether it's China wins or U.S. wins. So the reason is, the two countries are so, right now, despite, the links are being dismantled a little bit, but they're still so important in terms of the whole world, whether it's, proportion of GDP and people and the kind of influence and fundamental roles they play in global supply chains. Anything, beyond national security, right? Anything that's not really highly related to national security, like advanced semiconductors or military technology. There are actually a lot of collaboration on pharmaceutical industry, on retail, on like manufacturing, not advanced manufacturing, but manufacturing, and also definitely academic research, as well as potentially, hopefully, some more exchanges in terms of culture through whether it's through apps or through different platforms. It's a good way to think about this in a green sector, orange sector, and red sector, right? So all the red sectors are off limits, and then the green sectors are where we could freely collaborate, and then the yellow or the orange sector is where we could negotiate and also maybe discuss case by case. I think that's an approach that the EU set for AI regulation as well, like 3 levels. So that's a good approach and good framework to think about this.
You leave us with hope. Thank you very much. Always great to talk to you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
AI is transforming economic opportunities in Silicon Valley, and the high-tech hub is increasingly intertwined with China's AI development. Sean Randolph is Senior Director of the Bay Area Council Economic Institute, which analyzes how economic policy issues affect the region and the state. Let me ask about the San Francisco Bay Area and China's Bay Area, the relationship there. How would you describe it?
I think it's very promising. So we're a big economic region here. China Greater Bay Area is also a really big economic region. Our organization, the Bay Area Council, has had a dialogue with the China Greater Bay Area, with governmental entities, think tanks, businesses, going back to when the idea in China was first launched. And so there's a natural synergy, a natural basis for conversation and exchange between the San Francisco Bay Area and the China Greater Bay Area, because we have similar assets. We here are probably the world's #1 technology and innovation and entrepreneurial center. You have really strong technology in Shenzhen. You have more and more science. Shenzhen is, of course, a national magnet for entrepreneurs in China. There is a huge market in the Greater Bay Area. We have a lot of historical ties with Hong Kong that can play a pretty important intermediary role for our companies that are engaging in the Greater Bay Area. So, in the background, there's all kinds of issues. The national conversation between the U.S. government and the Chinese government make it complicated about what you can do realistically. There's some things that are just harder to do than they were 5 or 10 years ago. But nevertheless, the connections are very much there. And I think it's a natural conversation between our Bay Area and China's. The big difference is actually that aside from China's being much bigger geographically, much bigger population, I think we're more intensely focused on the technology and innovation side, but China's does a lot more manufacturing. We don't do a whole lot of manufacturing here anymore in the Bay Area, San Francisco. We do a lot of prototyping, a lot of early stage stuff, but at scale, supplier networks, that's much more in China. So I think we're going to have, one way or the other, a long-term relationship when it comes to supply chains, supplier networks, and just how the China fits into our global patterns here.
One of the guests I spoke to said that in China there are hundreds of Mark Zuckerbergs. They're just everywhere with all these young entrepreneurs, and I've met some of them, and I tended to agree with her. These guys, they're forward thinking, they're bouncing all these ideas off of each other, and that's kind of what the Silicon Valley's been too.
Very much,
manufacturing that. You talk about not manufacturing, that's been manufactured. Which gets to the whole idea of collaboration, but then competition and complexities. Can you talk about how do you differentiate between all the different C's?
It's really complicated, and it's more complicated than it was in the past. We used to, the Bay Area Council, be very active when we opened our first China offices more than 15 years ago, helping companies from here go into China, get their feet on the ground in the China market. It's a more complicated story now. So we've shifted. We do that. We actually set up a California pavilion every year in Shanghai at the CAIE, the big Shanghai International Import Expo. So we're very committed to that and keeping those channels open. We are still introducing companies from here into China and into the China market. I think we see a real opportunity at the entrepreneurial level. This is the biggest pool of entrepreneurs in the world here in the Bay Area. And we're very familiar with the entrepreneurial environment in China. And there's just a lot of aggressiveness and hard work and creative people. And so there's a lot of respect for what's coming out of China that gets reflected in a lot of technologies. Reflected in AI in China, reflected in robotics, reflected in batteries. So I think it's important for us to stay close to and engage with China on these emerging leading edge technologies, on innovation in some of these key fields, because between us and China, that's going to probably set the tune for the rest of the world. And where that opens up opportunities where we're able to collaborate, develop markets together, it's something we want to do. And it's difficult in some fields. There are barriers in semiconductors and barriers in AI, but things around renewable energy, things around climate where we have shared interests, certainly things around health. What about cancer? Cancer rates are rising in China as populations get older. Industrial pollution, all of those things. We have high cancer rates here. You could talk about Alzheimer's. You could talk about a lot of health-related products and therapies where we should be able to develop these together and manage those relationships effectively. So despite the fact that there are more obstacles on the field than there used to be, I think there's still a lot of relatively open doors we need to push on.
You mentioned AI. What about AI regulations? There's been so much discussion about that, and it doesn't seem like anybody's kind of landing one way or the other, and it seems like it's the wild, wild west, and everybody has a different idea. I mean, what are you hearing out there about that, and what are your thoughts?
It's a really good question because you have all these issues and potentialities around the investment in AI and about deployment, large language models, small language models, applications, the hardware, the whole thing. 75% of all the investment in the United States going into AI is going into AI companies in San Francisco and Silicon Valley. Wow. Primarily San Francisco. More than half of the leading generative AI companies in the world are located here around San Francisco. You could walk to them in 25 or 30 minutes. I think there's a recognition that we need guardrails of some kind. We need reference points of some kind that this can be deployed safely and not be misused. At the same time, philosophically, we don't in California want to get in the way of innovation. We don't want to start by crafting huge regulatory frameworks that inhibit the ability of companies here to grow as quickly as they possibly can because it's driving so much of the economy now.
Let me ask one final question, which gets to what you were just talking about, different perspectives, Europe and here. I often see the description of U.S.-China relations as this race to the future, and they're kind of neck and neck. But listening to you talking about cancer, why can't it be a race together to solve the problems?
Yeah.
And so that gets back to collaboration and this whole kind of collaboration competition. What needs to take place? I mean, what would you like to see happen to create more collaboration between the United States and China? And is it possible, or is there always going to be this tension, do you think?
Well, I hope there's not always this tension. We know there are issues. We know there are barriers, no question, but let's not stop there. Let's look for where the opportunities are to proceed together. And so we could have a conversation around what are the appropriate guidelines, guardrails for AI? Don't have to be doing AI research together. Internationally, what are the right kind of guardrails we should all be looking for? We see climate as being an area for cooperation for sure. I think I mentioned health. All kinds of issues around health and medicine we could be addressing. And Another one broadly is science, that there is a U.S.-China science agreement that was renewed about a year ago at the end of the Biden administration. It needs to be implemented. I think there's an opportunity to enact, to implement, to move forward the science agreement we have in place to do some new things that help all of our citizens and maybe citizens around the world. And then finally, it's not a popular thing with our government in D.C. now, but I think we've all benefited from having students going back and forth. There are so many fewer American students in China than there used to be. We ought to have a lot more students there. And even though, entry is more difficult than it once was, I think we should be setting a goal, whatever the guidelines are, with having as many Chinese students here as possible, because there's a legacy that comes from living with each other and getting to know each other.
People-to-people exchanges.
People to people, you bet.
Thank you so much.
Happy to, of course.
For more episodes, go to cgtnnow.com.
That's this edition of Full Frame. Our thanks to our guests for their perspectives on China-U.S. relations. If you know other visionaries you'd like to see on our show, email us at fullframe@cgtnamerica.com. And from all of us here on Full Frame, thanks so much for watching.